lies, shattering 4 families and lasting for more than a century. Only 50 years earlier, Clay County, Kentucky is transformed from a quiet, uninhabited area into a booming town, thanks to the abundance of salt mines.
The saltwaters drew in very wealthy entrepreneurs, members of landed and slave-owning families who came to Clay County to develop the salt industry. Foremost among them were the Whites and the Garretts.
The Garretts are distinguished Kentucky Democrats whose kin include the first governor of the state and various members of Congress. T.T. Garrett, the current head of the family, is even a U.S. Army general. The family history of the Whites is no less impressive. Republicans, they come to Kentucky from New England, where they have been prominent businessmen, congressmen, and even Speaker of the House of Representatives.
They sent all their children away to college, established them in business. They built fine homes. General Garrett had a great brick mansion out in the county, and the Whites had a fine home in town.
But with both families deeply ensconced in the lucrative salt mining business, a clash of the titans is inevitable.
The Whites cut the price of their salt 5 cents a bushel. The Garretts came back and cut theirs a little bit. The Whites cut under them. The Garretts cut again. That was the first clash between the two families.
Both the Whites and the Garretts are determined to control Clay County.
The Whites had a lot of control with political control local, and then when the Whites got some legislature control, then it kind of interfered with the Garrett's distinction. So I think that that's really one thing that really started the feud.
Theirs was a struggle for hegemony, for power over Clay County society. And in that struggle, they recruited their followers. It was their followers that were often involved in the most notorious acts of violence.
Caught in the middle of this power struggle are the Baker and Howard families.
The Bakers and the Howards had come into Clay County from North Carolina and from Harlan County, Kentucky.
The Howards and the Bakers were somewhat less successful on a somewhat lower social scale.
The Bakers and Howards both own land and sell timber. Their natural rivalry, coupled with political differences, soon creates a clear division in Clay County.
The Whites were Whigs after 1860, Republicans. The Howards allied themselves with the Whites partially because the politics. The Howards were also Republicans. The Garretts were Democrats, and the Bakers were all Democrats.
And it so happened the Bakers were aligned with the people on my father's side, and the Howards were aligned with the Whites on my mother's side.
It's the Garretts and Bakers versus the Whites and Howards. And with battle lines drawn, the two wealthy families look on as the violence in Clay County erupts.
The Whites and Garretts were often the lawmakers, the sheriffs, the attorneys, and it was their clients, their followers, who were carrying out much of the actual violence.
But Abner Baker hasn't killed a Howard. He has gone straight to the top. Daniel Bates is a white by marriage.
I don't think in those days it's been advisable at all to pick a fight with a white family because there were so many of them and they had so much political power. And they also had friends that were the same way.
Even with the Garrett's support, Abner's future looks grim. The whites want vengeance, and only a Baker's blood will do. Within days of Daniel Bates' death, Abner Baker is on trial for murder. For the Whites and Garretts, it is a contest of strength and power. And Abner Baker's fate lies in the hands of the would-be victor.
During the Abner Baker trial, the Garretts provided for Abner Baker's defense. They brought the lawyers in, they paid for the lawyers, and they supported the Bakers against the whites.
General Garrett took him before a magistrate who declared him insane. They thought he was safe then from prosecution. Well, he wasn't.
With the whites in control of the courts, Abner's insanity ruling is short-lived.
The whites were in political power, and they tried him again for the same crime, which is unconstitutional.
Unconstitutional or not, the verdict is handed down on July 17, 1845.
The court finds the defendant, Abner Baker, guilty of murder. You are hereby sentenced to hang.
The death sentence rings out through the streets of Clay County, dividing the town along family lines. Everyone must choose sides, support the Whites and Howards, or the Garretts and Bakers.
This left a rift between the Bakers and the Whites at that time because Cousin Abner was generally known to be insane and unstable.
He was guilty as hell. They never had eyewitness accounts, but he admitted killing him. Yeah, shot him. He was a nut.
The Bakers refused to stand by and let Abner be murdered by the white-controlled court. Any outcome would be less humiliating than a death sentence, even suicide.
They tried to slip him a knife with which to cut his wrist, but it was just a little penknife and he was unsuccessful.
Still, the whites ensure that Abner does not escape or die an easy death.
When Abner Baker was found guilty and was detained in the Clay County Courthouse, the whites, being in control of local politics, solicited people to guard him in jail.
Minister Dickey describes the security in detail.
After his conviction, the jail was strongly guarded to prevent his friends from rescuing him. Fortifications were built around the jail. Guards of 150 men from Madison County and 150 men from Clay County.
And guarding Abner is a lucrative business for the townsfolk. Yet another advantage of siding with the whites.
Guarding Abner Baker, for some people, resulted in as much as $80. You could buy a small farm with the amount of money you spent guarding Abner Baker in the few months while he was awaiting execution.
Only 3 months after the trial, Abner Baker's execution date is set. On October 3rd, 1845, the town square is scattered with onlookers. Some cheering, some crying.
On the day of the hanging, they dragged him up the steps. He was gesticulating wildly, and as the noose settled around his neck,
Abner cries out his last words.
Lord's work be done.
And the hangman obliged him, and he was hanged.
The whites get their revenge. The Garretts lose this battle. But this is a war that is only just beginning.
The Bakers were enraged because the whites had brought about the indictment of young Abner. And they turned against the whites very strongly then, and a wedge was driven between the families.
Abner will not be the last Baker to hang. Just a few years later, his cousin William faces execution.
William Baker was tried and found guilty of killing a man named Frank Pruitt, a itinerant shoemaker who was apparently having something to do with William's wife.
Frank Pruitt is kin to the Howard family. So when his remains are dug up by a local dog, the Howards turn to their most powerful ally, the White family, who see to it that the Bakers will pay. In an arrest that shocks the town, William Baker is charged with the murder and led away from his home. William swears he is innocent, but his pleas fall on deaf ears. Within days, William is standing in court, facing death for the murder of Frank Pruitt.
William came home and found his wife with this Pruitt, and according to the trial, killed him, took him out in the bushes and hid him, buried him.
Once again, the Garretts come to the Bakers' defense. And once again, the county is divided.
I think Matilda killed Pruitt. But when William came home, he helped dispose of the body. They hauled it off into the woods and put it behind a log, covered it with leaves.
But the court is not convinced. In a chilling reenactment of his cousin Abner's final days, William Baker is found guilty of murder. And on January 15th, 1850, is sent to the gallows. Resigned to his fate, William repeats his declaration of innocence before summing up the state of Clay County in a single sentence.
James White has too much money for a man such as me to live.
Five years later, a startling deathbed confession rocks the county. William Baker's wife admits to killing Pruitt herself.
Maybe he got fresh with her and she knocked him in the head. Some say that she knocked him in the head and took him under the floor, put him under the floor, and he was heard groaning, and William went in and finished up the job.
She admitted she had done it. She was carrying on with Pruitt. But it was too late then for William.
Twice now, the Garretts have lost their bitter power struggle with the Whites. And twice, it has cost a Baker his life. But there is plenty of time for revenge. Over the next 50 years, the feud continues to simmer. In 1898, a new generation of feuding is about to break out. And this time, the Bakers will have their day.
You're watching Clay County War here on the History Channel. Clay County War here on the History Channel.